Night. We're going to go ahead and get started. Minutes. Do we have any corrections to the minutes?
Yeah, sorry I didn't have them in your packet earlier.
So hearing no corrections to the minutes stand as read. Let's move on to item number one, Parmenter Street reconstruction.
Yes, thank you. We are joined today by our city engineer, Sean Stowski, who was kindly offered to join us. This is a project that we have been trying to work on for a number of years, and um, it's been stymied a bit by the real estate acquisition process. As you all know, um, cities are limited in Wisconsin with their ability to use eminent domain um, for pedestrian and bicycle facility accommodations. Roads are fine, but when there's extra accommodations, then along the side, then there's limitations to what the city can do without having the cooperation of adjoining property owners. Sean, I think since you're here, I will just turn this over to you, if that's okay. Or are you just a resource tonight? And we can't hear you. Tom Yost has joined us, by the way. So until Sean figures out the his audio issue, I'll get started. So in the packet is a memo from our consultant that has been helping the city at MSA.
Is this working?
Yep, Sean, we hear you now.
Oh, all right. My wife told me there's a secret button on this headset, so I guess if I push that, it works.
I'm
Uh,
surprised she told you where the button is.
yeah, it could have taken a little longer, but that's okay. I have people. So Kevin Lord wrote this memo. He is our client liaison. He's pretty involved with the design of this project, and it's at heart sort of an expansion project, right? We're trying to widen it, but add a really wide median in the middle of the road for future potential travel lanes. So a two-lane road will still be a two-lane road for now. We're trying to add bike lanes, a bike path on one side, multi-use path on one side, and a sidewalk on the other. As Mark already mentioned, not only did the state law change, but a court case interpreted that state law differently than we would have, and included things like sidewalks as pedestrian way, which we were pretty sure meant outside the right of way, but now it doesn't. So that's being appealed, but in the meantime, we're dealing with what we're dealing with, and so we can't use eminent domain. Property owners have said they'll negotiate with us for rights of way and easement acquisitions needed for the project, which is intended in a 90-foot right of way. And they've spent an inordinate amount of time trying to talk, negotiate, review second appraisals, but without any certainty that there will be an end to the process. And that's, I think, a big part of the frustration now that we're all dealing with and finding our way through. So even though they're continuing to try to refine the design within some reasonable bounds, and we'll have to talk about that more at the Public Works Committee, like I said, there's no certainty that we'll reach conclusion, in which case we have to start looking at things like, do we narrow the roadway in some way, either to eliminate the median, which would account for the future potential to add traffic lanes, or forego parts of sidewalk and or multi-use path, either just adjacent to properties that we can't close with, reach agreement with, or in entire blocks, so that we don't end up sending people down these are kind of long blocks, sending people down a block only to find out that there's a gap, a discontinuity, and they'll have to turn around and come back. Or do we defer the project, which was hoped for bidding soon and construction in 2024, push that back to construction in 2025 so that we'd have a little extra time to deal with some of these issues? Or do we just terminate the project? Anything beyond 2025 just isn't going to work either for our funding or the WISDOT reimbursement, which is $1 million. If we modify the design too much, it's just unknown to how that would affect WISDOT funding. So we'd have to pursue that.
What you're seeing on the screen is the essence of the problem is the right-of-way varies in width throughout the quarter. This is the old Highway 12, as most of you probably know. And so we don't have a uniform right-of-way width through the quarter.
Hey, Mark, this is Carrie. I just wanted to let you know that I am on. Sorry for the delay. I was having some Zoom issues.
Yep, I noticed you were here. Thank you.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah, and so that's a pinch point in the right of way that Mark was pointing out, but there are other areas where we have easement needs. We have sufficient right of way, but we still have easement needs to go into people's yards, even just for temporary grading, and we weren't able to get those permissions yet. So.
Are these all private businesses? There's no residential issues here, is there?
There is one private single-family residence property further north, up by Springton Drive. And we have a lot of right-of-way up there, but we're also trying to get linear stormwater features to deal with some of the impervious area, because that's the Graber Pond watershed. So we're trying to convert some ditches to ponds while still getting a multi-use path and sidewalk in there. And that would require just temporary limited easements with a couple of small permanent easements to get yard drains to drain from that front yard under the sidewalk into the ponds.
Well, I think the businesses would behoove them to give us the easements to get the changes, because that road's in pretty tough shape out there. I've driven that a couple of times.
Yeah, I don't think anyone disagrees. And we're not talking about giving as much as allowing us to purchase, but we just have not been able to reach agreement on terms. So the latest that I had heard from our design team is that they've done some significant work to try to redesign Parmenter Street right at that driveway that's shared between REA to the north, that's that big white roof building, and Middleton Outreach Ministry, which had recently acquired the Knockreiner property with that sort of brown roof on it, that they've massaged the design sufficiently to improve significantly the grades of that driveway. And they think verbally then they're at an agreement, but it is a pretty big change to the design. So if we want to pursue that, we'd have to talk about what that means then to the city, because it changes the road.
Lisa?
Couple questions for Sean. First, just looking at those parcels, is it common for a building to straddle two parcels owned by different entities?
I'm not certain that the GIS overlay of those parcel lines truly reflects the aerial image underlay.
Yeah,
okay.
There's often distortion with the mapping. Aerial photography is rarely centered unless the photo is taken directly overhead, and so there's oftentimes distortion.
Okay. And then as to I think scrapping the project is, in my opinion, not an option. is there a particular holdout or a couple of holdouts? I know you can't identify them, but is this a big problem or just one or two?
I would say I think there are 15 or 16 parcels in the whole project, and it's maybe 5 or 6 that we're so far unable to come to terms with.
Okay. And then one last question. So if we were to change the design, I agree with what's in the memo that because of our complete streets policy, we really shouldn't cut the sidewalks and the path and the bike lanes. What about, would our funding from WISDOT be jeopardized if we eliminated the median in the entire length or just the portions where I'm assuming as we get closer to Century, we probably have, well, maybe we don't have more flexibility, but basically what would happen to our grant if we got rid of the median in parts?
Yeah, and I can't even answer that. They have a process, but their process is, well, let us know what your plans are, and we'll pass that along to the board that makes a decision, and they'll get back to you. I got the general sense, and this is all just through reading emails, so I could be wildly off base, but I got the general sense that if we had to modify small portions of this, they might be open to that. What I don't know is to what degree they would factor lanes or future lanes versus pedestrian bike facilities, whether on road or off the side of the road. They're both valuable in different ways, and I don't know if their funding was considered more of a roadway expansion project, even though we weren't going to expand it until the future, or if it was an overall really overall capacity that they were interested in. So we'd have to find out.
Kirsten.
Oh, you're muted too, Kirsten. You might have a magic button.
There we go. Thank you. Sorry, this screen changed and I couldn't get the button. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So I think it's really important that we have a continuous sidewalk and continuous bike lane, that we don't have any sections cut if we're going to do this. We have too many areas in the city that already have some missing links, and it's proven to be such an issue and difficult to get that missing link filled. So if we are going to go through with this, I think that it's extremely important to have continuous sidewalk and continuous path or bike lane the entire way. And that's it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And sidewalk. Maybe you said that, I didn't write it down. Okay.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to recognize that John Schaefer's here as well.
Hi, sorry, with fighting the rain.
No worries.
All right.
If nobody else does anybody else have anything? I do have a comment, so I'm checking for everybody else first. So honestly, I think we do have a design that would fit in a 65-foot right of way already. It's a road diet. I've been looking at the traffic counts on Parmenter last year. Well, it was actually August 2022. It was 4,800. I think the Federal Highways says that a road diet can work up to volumes of 25,000. So it would have to quintuple before we really needed to worry about car road expansion. So I think we have a budget version, if you will, that will perform admirably for what we're actually talking about up there. So if we do need to change that, I'm not particularly worried about it. Anything else from anybody?
Sean, could you comment on why that wasn't a design option? Why is it because you're trying to extend the cross section that's to the south, to the north, or what was the thinking there?
Well, both to the south and to the north are 4-lane right now. Yeah, and I think the idea was let's preserve that potential future capacity, but not build it right now. And maybe we'll never need it, which would be fine. Then we just won't build it. But it's difficult to start rebuilding stuff later from the inside out. So I think that was the thinking.
Jim? Jim, you're muted.
I can ask to unmute just like I did with, there you go.
The area that you're talking about for future expansion, would that be the area north of Century?
North of, so our cross section really is for a wide 22-foot wide median in the middle of the street, curb, grass, that could later be converted to pavement if warranted, so that 2 lanes could become 4 lanes pretty easily.
Okay, and that would be in what area? That
pretty much the length of this project. So from just north of Century Avenue up to Greenbrier Road.
Okay. I would tend to agree with Tad somewhat on this, in that I don't see a lot of that being used for a lot of traffic, because if you're looking at access to Highway 12, you're either going to be getting on at University or on Century. And I'm thinking that's where most of your traffic would be. And I would like to also make the comment, I think Kirsten mentioned it, and I don't like I think my opinion is either you scrap the whole project or you come up with some way. And if that involves eliminating the median, you do it that way, because otherwise we're just going to face this every time an issue comes up, and we want to try to employ our complete streets policy. But anyway, that was all I wanted to say.
John?
Yeah, I hear your comments, but I think when Bell Farms comes in, you're going to have another 500 or 600 cars pouring in every direction on this road. So I don't see this as being a static amount of traffic. That what we see now is what's going to be there in 5 or 6 years. So I think I appreciate the design is trying to accommodate that, but I think it will be coming along sooner than later, personally.
Lisa has her hand up.
Oh,
I appreciate Alder Schaefer's comments. As someone who drives on this stretch of road and walks on it too, I almost never am impeded in making a left turn onto the road. I mean, it's not very well traveled right now. And I think anyone coming out of the Bell Farm development, and even when it connects further east to Misty Valley and Red Tail Ridge, I think anyone traveling through there to get to the Beltline is just going to head north and pick up the Beltline, whether they're going north or south. It's just a faster connection. I think the road diet, especially if Tad's right and it can go up to, a couple, what did you say, 20,000?
The Federal Highways Administration on their Proven Safety Countermeasures webpage for road diets says that the maximum volume is 25,000 average annualized daily traffic. So that's 25,000 vehicles. It covers both directions. It's all day. So I do want to acknowledging John's, but I and piggybacking off Lisa, and sorry for interrupting, I do want to point out that from a technical perspective, if 600 cars are coming in and they're making 3 round trips a day and they're crossing the same point, that's 6 trips for each of those cars. That's 3,600 AADT. Combined with the 4,800 that is there at the moment, that would add up, math is escaping me, to 8,400 trips per day, which is less than half of the volume of a road diet. So I just want to point that technical issue out. Lisa, back to you. Sorry.
No. I was just saying I can support the road diet idea. I'm curious if Mark or Sean can comment on, I know Century Avenue, the thought was to put that on a road diet, and that's way busier than this stretch of Parmenter is. So I guess I would look at options 4 and 5 in the memo dated January 22nd, and maybe, do those 2 together.
And I just want to say Sean has not proposed a road diet for Century Avenue. That's been something that I have floated and a couple of committee members have talked about, but that's not something that's come from city engineering.
Well, but it's in the comprehensive plan.
Understood, but I just wanted to just make that distinction.
Carrie. Carrie, you are muted.
Thank you. I agree with Tad and Lisa on this as well. Like, I think the road diet seems to like solve a lot of problems ideas. So I think that would be, and we have other examples, right, on Gammon Road, for example, right? Like, I think that that's worth exploring. Lisa, when you said option 3 in the memo, are we saying then that is that saying that bike paths would not be created at this time? Is that?
Maybe I misspoke. I meant options 4 and 5. Okay. So deferring the project to 25 if we can't meet the schedule this year with the redesign. But no, I think the only thing that we should consider changing is the median, and that would be by way of, doing the road diet idea.
Yeah, I agree with option 4. Yeah, as well. So, okay, thanks for clarifying. So yeah, I have the same question for Lisa. If Sean and Mark what are your thoughts on those possibilities?
You're a little hard to hear, by the way. I don't know if it's your microphone or how far you are from it, Carrie, but I heard you, but just FYI, it's a little hard to hear you.
Thanks.
One more question for you, Sean. When we originally were talking about Bellefontaine as a 4-lane road, we then asked the Metropolitan Planning Organization and their traffic modeling whether it could be built instead as a 2-lane. Have you or has the consultant broached this idea with our regional traffic model folks?
No, we didn't circle back on that after it was quite a lot of conversation to get a design, but once the council endorsed that, that's what they've been working on.
And the council endorsed that design a few years ago. When was that endorsement?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I don't remember, but it's several years ago.
The design of Parmenter reconstruction?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I think that was done at my first meeting on Public Works in May last year.
Oh, no, the council setting the cross section at 90 feet with desired elements, that was several years ago. We looked at the preliminary design, recently.
Well, my point that I was getting at is if the thinking has evolved regionally by the traffic model folks about Bellefontaine, maybe it'd be some merit in running by them if they have any concerns with with the road diet concept, a 2-lane with a 2-way left turn lane concept for the north-south street as well. I like the idea as well. I think it's, I think we are in a different era than we were a few years ago, where we are trying to tame our streets instead of building more lanes. And my personal view is that Parmenter Street north of the roundabout, especially north of Donna Drive, is overbuilt and will always be overbuilt. So that's just my 2 cents. What are the implications for the design change? If we went with number 4, Sean, you talked earlier about the budget with MSA and how they're an inordinate amount of time, I think was the word you used, that they've spent on some aspects of this project. Would this require substantial redesign? Would there be additional funding sought by the consultant?
Yeah, we're going to be talking about that with the Public Works Committee anyway on Monday, just because real estate has been in a loop with some of the property owners, but redesign would change that too. So, 4 and 5 really go together. I mean, there's just no way to redesign it this year and build it this year.
But with the redesign, you would be maybe addressing or resolving all or mostly all of the real estate issues.
Well, I think that's the direction
Right.
we would be giving.
Right.
Yeah. Is just take out up to 22 feet.
Right.
Lisa?
Thanks. Just a process question. So I wonder, is it ever done that the outreach to the people whose property we might need an easement on or need to acquire, that we do that type of work first to get their input up front and therefore avoid spending an inordinate amount of time on a design that might not actually be possible? I mean, it just seems like, and I ask this because the idea of terminating a, $4.6 million project that a lot of time has been invested in seems like maybe we should have taken the approach of working with the landowners first to find out, what are they willing to do, and then design the road within those bounds. And this is relevant also to our discussion of the Cayuga connector, and how much we want to invest in developing a design for that without knowing if we're even going to get permission from landowners whose land we need an easement on.
Sure. And it's a good question. It's a little bit circular. So number one, I would say they started design with the set of rules that condemnation was feasible. And that was just how we've played the game forever. The rules changed while they were designing it. But also, when we approach property owners, they're very interested in, what are you doing? Why do you need that much land? What's it going to look like? So you really have to have some degree of preliminary design done before getting in touch with them. It's just that when we got in touch with them, we said, and that was right when the rule was changing, oh, by the way, we're not even talking about condemnation. We're talking about having to negotiate and agree on these real estate issues.
Jim?
If we look at options 4 and 5, as you said, pretty much one and the same, or that they're tied together, what impact does that have on funding?
Well, I don't know. I think really before we start redesigning stuff, or maybe at the same time, got to get a hold of the DOT, which then forwards our application for a change to a committee, which makes a decision. And if they agree that that's okay, they would issue a new state municipal agreement. If not, I mean, it could potentially jeopardize up to $1 million of grant funding.
Okay.
Any further questions? I guess further discussion. Are we ready? Oh, Lisa.
I just have a question for Mark and Sean. How much TID 3 money are we spending on Pleasant View Road reconstruction?
Huh. I don't recall offhand. I'd have to look that up. It's
And I don't know
10.
off the top of my head either, but it's extraordinarily expensive. I know that.
Yeah, I know it was over 12.
Yeah.
I know the project itself was over $12 million, but I didn't know how much of that came from TID 3. But just looking, we've got 5 million budgeted for that this year and 4.6 for the Parmenter reconstruction, leaving a balance of 14.7 million. So as much as $1 million is a lot of money, I'd hate to lose that. But at the same time, I've wondered why we're spending so much money on the Pleasant View Road reconstruction. What's the cost benefit of that? And I think it's clear that there's a benefit to doing this construction project on Parmenter, especially given the apartments coming in. So I'd be willing to take this back to the finance committee if we needed to come up with more money for the project. But definitely would like to hold on to the grant and would be happy to try to figure out how to reach out to elected officials above the local level to make that happen.
Those are good points. Can you guys hear me? Those are good points, Lisa. And I would just say that I don't know, Sean, how likely it is for grants to get extended, but this does seem like a pretty good reason, right? Like it's not like we're delayed internally or something. It's that we're having issues with acquisition. So I don't know, like we ever
Yeah.
have done this in the past, how likely it is to get it extended?
I don't know that we've done it on road projects like this, but I think the flip side of that is we've been talking about TIF 3 expenditure period closing in 2025. So we're kind of at the end of our own rope too. I mean, that said, if the choice is to redesign this and build it in 2025, I don't think that becomes the big problem. We'd still have our money, and if the state says yes, we'd still have their money too.
Any further discussion? All right, so Mark, just to clarify, you're looking for a recommendation from us on which of the options to pursue?
Yes, the Public Works Committee is asking for input. The city engineer is asking for input from this committee as well as the Plan Commission. And then Public Works, and that will all go to the council then.
Mm-hmm.
So a motion coming out of this meeting would be helpful.
All right, do I hear a motion for a recommendation?
I would make a motion that we accept or that we endorse options 4 and 5, assuming that they're linked, that we endorse options 4 and 5 based on the memo dated January 29th, 2024.
The motion is to recommend options 4 and 5. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Who is the second? I'm sorry.
Gail.
Okay.
All right. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? All right, the ayes have it. Item number 2.
Thank you, Sean, for joining us. I appreciate it.
Sure. I think if just plan to sit in for number 2 here too, just for more background information.
That is actually very helpful. Tad, are you ready to move on to number 2?
Yep, let's go to item number 2.
This request came to us from some guy named Dale Rhodes with the school district, of course. And Dale, you want to, since you brought this up to us, do you want to speak to this?
Well, I can. So the girls' soccer coach had a concern. She said it was brought to her attention. I asked for more information and I didn't receive anything back. But she's saying that it's becoming unsafe for pedestrians to cross at that location and also turning off at Airport Road there. I traveled that stretch a lot during the day. There's a lot of walkers there, but it's pretty open. There's no obstruction view that I see. But I told her I would bring it to the committee, and that's where we're at.
And then I asked Sean to react to Dale's email, and that's in your packet then. A little bit edited because there was some additional information that wasn't germane to this. So this is essentially, Sean, your response.
Yeah, I wonder, Dale, I don't know the coach really, but if she wanted to check in with me, maybe I could try to get some more detail about what's unsafe about it. It was difficult for me to read into that email the nature of the problem.
Yeah, so she gave me a laundry list of items. You know, soccer season's coming up, and she wants everything taken care of. So this is just one of the items that she had brought forward. So I can have her reach out to you, Sean.
It would be most helpful to me, I think, because it seemed like, well, here's some stuff I want done because it's dangerous. But if we do the wrong thing, we won't solve the problem, whatever it is.
Yeah, so I did forward that letter to her this morning, saying, "Hey, I need some more information," and but I will reach out to her tomorrow, and hopefully she reaches back to you.
Okay.
Ken?
Yeah, I got 2 questions. What's the speed limit on Airport Road, and where's the parking for the soccer fields?
I think the speed there is 35. I'm not positive of that. I suspect most of the parking for the soccer stadium use is internal to the park. You can just see it in the lower right corner.
Just looking for speed limits right now.
Oh.
.40, I think it is. Yeah, there's 40 right here.
Okay.
And I assume it's higher. Well, it's at least 40 going the other way, if not 45. And where did you want to go here?
He was asking where the parking for the soccer stadium is, and I just assumed they used the parking lot in the park for that.
I would assume so. Well, but there's parking allowed. I don't know if there's enough parking. Well, that's a good question. So sorry, there's now elevations in here too, in anticipation of our next item. So this is just, I'm almost there. Here we go. So the lion's share of the parking is, well, all the parking is really east of the soccer fields. And I would imagine that because of proximity, people are parking along the street as well because they don't want to walk as far over here.
Mm.
So I'm sure, human nature being what it is, people look for the closest parking spot, even though their kids are then going to run for thousands of yards to.
Kirsten?
Yes, I bike that section frequently to commute to clients, and I think that just west of it, it goes to 45.
Right.
And people are always going 45 to 50 in the 40 speed limit. Oftentimes there's a police officer sitting just beyond that, pulling people over because of that reason.
Is that a Middleton police officer?
Yeah, I've seen Middleton police officers there.
And then there's across the street, there is like more fields. Like, so if you zoom out, yeah, so there's, I can see why there's maybe other, pedestrians crossing there too, potentially. There's a path, but that goes under the road.
Yeah, here's the. But yeah, that's obviously the safest way to cross the street is to not interact with the cars at all. But it's people like the shortest distance, and that's human nature. So Dale, is that your experience then that you can see that there's room here to park?
Yeah, they do park along there during soccer matches. Quite a few of them. But again, I think it's pretty open, the line of sight, unless there is cars parked there and they're stepping out between them. But
yeah.
I wonder, do people park and then go get on the sidewalk and cross at the crosswalk, or do they just run across?
I can't speak on
that.
Yeah. Most people, I think, if they park here, are not going to walk up to a crosswalk. I'll reluctantly put myself in that category.
Well, to Mark, what's the distance between those crosswalks?
Or just under 500 feet.
Okay. Yeah. So not super terrible.
No. No, I mean, obviously best practice is to go to the crosswalk and, I just speaking for myself, I will go to a crosswalk if I feel I need the crosswalk to cross the street. So
but if there's a median island, I'm going to scramble across.
Right. Anyway, so it sounds like you're going to discuss this further with the soccer coach, Sean. That's where you're going with this.
Well, I was just inviting Dale to pass along that if she wants to chat with me, that would be helpful.
I agree. She might have some more information that we're just not seeing.
Right.
Ken?
Yeah, is there any signage there to indicate children are playing around that area and crossing the road?
The mid-block crossing has advanced warning signs and crosswalk warning signs. Yeah.
But a lot of times kids get out of the car. I've seen that near parks. You got to go slow because those kids get out and there's only thing on their mind is get to the park. They're not looking or anything. That I don't know what the speed limit in there is, but
I think it's 35 here too.
You got young kids that are just running.
I don't know that we have a speed limit sign in this area, but this seems to be a pretty old image. I think John has his hand up too.
John.
Yeah, at first I was thinking, that the fact that the bike lanes are there gives you better visibility because even with parked cars, you still have the bike lane. But when you were going through that picture, I saw two cars with both half their cars are on the bike lanes. Back around by the bend, there was a service truck and everything else. Yeah, that car right there is half in the bike lane.
Yeah.
And so there goes that idea. And that truck sitting in the bike lane too. So just more point of interest. But I think, the idea of visibility, having the bike lanes essentially gives you a buffer if you're going to cross and there are parked cars that are blocking the view, you have another 3 or 4 feet to be able to sort of take a look for what that's worth.
Well, that's obviously sloppy driving.
Yeah.
Well, this to the buffer idea, here you go. You can see it with the cars that are parked at ETC.
Yeah, you've got a buffer before you're out in traffic.
Yeah.
Lisa?
I wonder if when we resume this discussion after getting more information, could it be part of a larger, more citywide conversation about, I don't want to say hot spots, but other, just safety improvements to pedestrian infrastructure in the city, not just this one location, because I was going to ask for next time to add a discussion of Century and High Road. A constituent, a young middle schooler was recently hit while crossing Century Avenue. It was his backpack that got clipped, but it spun him around and he fell, which is, as you can imagine, very jarring for a young person or any person. And the car drove away, but I heard from the police that they found the driver. Anyway, his mother has reached out, and the HOA where they live has reached out, and she's reached out to the school. So, there are other places in the city where we need to figure out a way to try to improve pedestrian safety. And I wonder if we could have a bigger discussion than just one specific location.
This is Kirsten. I would like that as well.
I would suggest that we actually will have a great opportunity to talk about that as with the agenda item regarding the active transportation plan. We'll get to that, but I think those are good points.
No, I concur with Alder Hanairo because I have people out on the west side in my district too, going out on Greenway, where there's a lot of pedestrians, a lot of apartments built and nothing yet. I think we have some promise to put a stopper in somewhere, but that's another place where a lot of people cross, and elderly people who go slow.
All right, do we want to do anything formal with this discussion, or do we want to move on? I'm not actually sure.
It sounds to me like Sean was inviting Dale to ask the soccer coach to talk about it further with him at this point.
Yeah.
So I think that's good enough there's no need for any formal action.
All right. And if nobody is opposed, we'll move on to item number 3, the Cayuga connector.
See you, Sean.
Yep. Have a good night.
So this item is in your packet. It is from a budgeted item for this year, for 2024. The council has placed $70,000 in the budget for design of what we're calling the Cayuga connector. Whoops. So this is something that was originally in our 2009 bicycle network plan, bicycle pedestrian plan is what we called it. And the idea behind it was to, I'm sorry, you're not seeing the rest of the trail network now, but you all are familiar with the trail along the Pheasant Branch Creek corridor, and orange is showing contour lines that are steep slopes in this case. So the idea is to connect the downtown with the east-west back spine of the city's trail network with a trail that never has to cross a road other than the south leg of the roundabout, not far from Hall's Bar. So that's the only place you have to cross, and then you can get to, if it's built, you'll be able to get right to the downtown doorstep here by the fire station. In anticipation of a question that I heard Alder Hanairo mentioned earlier, there are possibly there's possibly one location where the trail would clip a property, this corner property, but based on the contour lines, it's not necessarily the case. And so this is a good case of where we need a preliminary design to decide what's the best layout. Are there any, is there any standing water here? Is there grade? Are there grade issues? We don't know exactly what the impact will be on this corner of this property. It possibly could be avoided. The DOT, I did broach this with them. In fact, it took over a year to get a response from them about whether they would even be receptive to allowing this path in their right of way. And in October, they wrote back to me and said, yes, but you have to follow all the design standards, the facilities design manual, et cetera. And I put that language into the request for proposals. So their basic standard is that they want to be, the path has to be at least 16 feet outside of the travel way. And that becomes an issue down by the fire station. 16 feet is, there's not too much room here, but there is, I'd say this distance here, this is about 30, what I just drew is 31 feet. So it is theoretically possible to put the path here and have it be right up against the fire station property. So we felt that theoretically this could happen without significant property impacts. Those are the only two properties that would be affected. I would add that there's what I would call surplus right-of-way here. This is, sorry, let me zoom in again. I'm trying to get there we go, it's better. So there's actually right-of-way here that obviously will never be used for anything, for road purposes. So this path would provide some access to this area as well. So that's the background. And then here's the scope of services. So what I did was take a document from a few years ago that I did for the North Mendota Trail, and then incorporated the language from DOT here that they were requesting be included. So that's the background I have. I also ran this by our city engineer who reviewed it and added some edits. And so it's all been vetted by our engineering staff. The result of this work would be a preliminary design that would give us an estimate in time by August, in time for the budget for the council's consideration, if that's something they wanted to proceed with and fund in a future budget starting as early as next year. And then the final design would be also a component of this project. I've also discussed it with our Parks and Recreation Director, so that she's aware of this, and our trail system, our path system is maintained by our park staff. So there's obviously an ongoing maintenance concern in the future as well. That's all I have.
Lisa?
Thanks. I like this project. I think avoiding the need to acquire any easements would be great. It looks like we probably would need temporary easements for construction purposes. I'm looking at the Google map. I don't know how recent that is, but it looks like there's a whole bunch of trees that might be impacted by the design. And you know that people love their trees. So I don't know if there's a way to try, I mean, right next to the fire station, it looks like there are some trees. So just to be mindful of that.
Yeah. And there's also what's not obvious from an air photo is that there's drainage ways, and that's actually the DOT's biggest concern is making sure that we're not, you can see here, this will be somewhat challenging here. There's a pretty deep ditch. So, this is not, it's a fairly straightforward design project, but this we've known all along that the biggest choke point is right by the fire station. That both the drainage way and then, like you said, the trees. But there does seem to be some room. And then the other question is, would they want the fence? My guess is they would want the fence separating the they'd want, because this is a freeway, they'd want to have the path be on the outside of the fence. So there definitely are, this is definitely the biggest challenge here. And then the one by back here, there's some, should be a bill. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, so it would follow along here, and here's this cutting through here versus, I don't know those details at this point. That's why we need the preliminary design. We obviously wouldn't want to cut into the embankment and create a retaining wall. It would be much better to just avoid that. So that's where we'd have to coordinate with the property owner, but it's obvious this is not really used other than for trees, which are important, but it's not like it's actively used by the property owner either. So.
Ken.
Yeah, once they get to the fire station, where do you expect people are going to go? Is there bike paths past the fire station on University?
We have a crosswalk here. I would envision a nicer crosswalk in the future at some point. This one's pretty weathered. I don't know how old this air photo is probably pretty recent. So it would just connect with our sidewalk system.
So then the bikes would share the sidewalks with the pedestrians.
Well, or the street, right?
Yeah.
I have seen kids on bikes at that exact crossing, so it's definitely occurring.
Well, Parmenter is becoming a busier street, especially with our new bus service. There's buses now regularly along here, and the bike lanes. What I've come to learn as I've gotten older is there's just a number of people who just aren't comfortable biking on the street. No matter if you put in, well, I mean, a bike lane is just, in Middleton's case, our bike lanes are just separated by a thin stripe of paint. They're not protected bike lanes, and we have some limitations for putting in buffered bike lanes and protected bike lanes everywhere. So a lot of people, especially families and bicyclists who are less confident, are preferring our trail networks. Oops, sorry. So what's before you tonight is the is to make a recommendation, well, to authorize the release of this. Essentially, I just felt it was important to introduce you to the project in greater detail, see if you had any concerns about the scope. Ultimately, what will happen is what I've asked with the timeline here is I plan to release this tomorrow and then have responses for the next meeting so that we can then recommend to if necessary, go through an interview process. Maybe wouldn't be ready to make a recommendation at the next meeting, but at least get going with this, so that the idea was to have enough work done through preliminary design in time for the budget season to get a handle on what a good cost estimate would be, to see if that's something the council wants to proceed with for construction.
So do I hear?
Go ahead.
So do I hear a motion to endorse releasing the request for proposal for engineering and construction consulting services for the Cayuga Connector bike path?
I'll make that motion.
Bill's moved. Do we have a second?
This is Kirsten. I'll second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
And that was a motion by Dale, you said?
That was a motion by Dale.
Okay, yep. I heard the second. Okay, thank you.
All right.
And that just for Lisa's benefit and John's benefit, that's not something I feel needs to go to the council. I wanted the committee just to see if you had any concerns here, because there's no expenditure of funds beyond, it's already been budgeted. So it's not something I was planning. I was planning to just work and proceed with this, with your direction here, and having consulted with my colleagues. There's not really a policy issue here. So if you're okay with that, what you ultimately approve at the council is the contract with the selected consultant. So,
Yeah, oh, I'm fine.
okay.
All right. Item number 4, kicking off the active transportation plan.
Yeah. So I didn't have anything in your packet, but I have done some thinking about it. I was on vacation last week, so I'm still catching up from that. But what I wanted to do was get really your input and see how you envision as a committee this process going. Recall that we've talked about this in the context of when I visited Fort Collins last summer. And then did some research coming back and discovered they had something that they called the active modes plan. But since then, it seems to be quite fashionable to refer to these as active transportation plans. And I discovered just this afternoon that Sun Prairie has adopted an active transportation plan. So we are, and NDOT has one as well. Here is just to show you. So here's Sun Prairie. I don't expect to go through and read everything now, because that's not a very efficient use of time. But the point is, it's a well thought out 75-page plan. Fort Collins, this is Fort Collins. They have a different type of structure. It's not as it's similar. It touches on a lot of similar things, just organized differently, probably different consultants, or well, certainly different staff. So I reviewed those, and as I was also thinking about this, and I wanted to walk through a couple things to get your feedback. One, I want to emphasize that the preparation of the plan is going to be in-house. We do not have funds budgeted for a consultant, and that is something I'm perfectly comfortable with. We have a good mapping resource here, my colleague Daphne. We have a lot of interested people in the community, several of whom are on this committee. And the question I would have for you, the first question is, what kind of oversight do you see a steering committee formed, or would this committee be sufficient to help bounce chapters off of process things like that, facilitating community input? How would you? I guess I was looking for some direction and how you as members would view the process.
Kirsten?
As a committee member, I'd feel very comfortable participating in this and having, since we're discussing this stuff, constantly anyway. If others are comfortable with it, I most certainly would be.
Jim? Jim, you're muted.
I would like to see involvement by the committee, but I think the enormity of the task, which is quite large, would like to see something similar to with the University Avenue Corridor Committee, where you had people who were both from the city staff, people on committees, and people in the community who didn't serve on any committees.
John? You're muted.
Sorry. I guess I concur with Jim. It will ultimately be a very large task. Although to just start with a big committee without some idea of where we're going and how we want to, frame it, as Mark is starting to do, I think that part needs to be done first. So I see this as 2 stages where we could perhaps work as putting a foundation in place, and then work it into bigger committee structure that brings in more people. Just a thought.
I have a couple more. Maybe it would be good for me to quickly go through a couple things, and then that might help the discussion as well. So one thing I've also come to learn in my years of working is that a lot of times other communities have thought of a lot of great ideas, and there's no harm in it's the highest form of flattery to emulate what they're doing if it's successful, right? So in terms of how we are framing this planning process and what our vision is, I actually really liked if let me make it a little bigger here for you all. I actually really liked the vision statement from Fort Collins, Colorado, which I switched the sentences around. But, Middleton is a place where walking, bicycling, and using other active modes are safe, accessible, convenient, joyful, and desired by people of all ages and abilities. Active transportation is an integral part of daily life and the local cultural experience. I suggested that as a potential vision statement to help frame where we're going here. This is one of those statements that to me is extremely descriptive, and I don't know that anybody would object to this. Obviously, welcome. This isn't something you have to decide tonight, but it's just to, help you think about and frame this planning process, recognizing there's already a lot of good ideas out there. Key objectives that I read that I came across was I thought also Fort Collins, or maybe it was Sun Prairie, I can't remember which, but they had 4 major objectives centered on safety. And I added the word vision 0 because this is a term that we're seeing in the transportation community. It is mentioned in our comprehensive plan, the idea of having no fatalities or serious injuries. This one's focused on pedestrians and bicyclists. Equity is obviously a huge theme for our community, for every community, removing systemic barriers so all persons can participate fully in the community. Mode shift. Now, this was definitely Fort Collins. I remember this now. Mode shift, Fort Collins wanted within 10 years to achieve 50% active mode share. In Middleton, I think that's a pretty unrealistic goal. Fort Collins is a different type of community, different climate, but that was their goal for mode shift. And then climate, of course, climate change, reducing emissions and waste, improving energy efficiency. So those are objectives that drove the Fort Collins plan process. How would the plan be organized? Very standard planning approach, plan approach. Background, what are we talking about here? What are the benefits of this? Community engagement, I'll get to that in a moment, some ideas. Existing conditions, looking at our current plans, policies, ordinances, programs. Where are we having incidents, and not just crashes, but I also think having close calls. I've heard that from Kirsten and others, that just because a crash hasn't happened doesn't mean there isn't a safety issue or that it's not a barrier. Somebody might think, oh, this is really unsafe, I can't cross here. And that's where item C. So these are some things adapted from other plans that I thought are really important. Low stress bicycle network is the MPO, the Metropolitan Planning Organization, already has this all mapped. We can look at how if that tracks for Middleton, if we need to make any adjustments to that. Again, a lot of data is already out there. And where do we have potential based on density of our street grid, housing density, census analysis? Where do we have a potential to really improve active transportation? Then I envision a chapter on the proposed network, which is a series of maps identifying improvements for pedestrians, including pedestrian safety crossing areas, as we were talking about with the first agenda item. Or I'm sorry, that was Pleasant View Road. Bikeways and shared use paths. The concept also not just bicycling, but micro mobility. Now, these are 2 things that Fort Collins and Sun Prairie did not emphasize, which I think we really should incorporate. Interfacing with transit. Of course, to be a transit user, you're a pedestrian or you're a bicyclist, but I want to make sure that we also talk about how we make transit as accessible as possible. And then the overall concept of accessibility. One of the things that John, your predecessor on the city council, was very interested in, this issue for downtown, for example. Where do we have, I envisioned this also as part of our Complete Streets network, making sure that everybody in the community, including people who use a wheelchair or have other limited mobility, are also able to participate as active members. And that's not a theme that I saw in the Sun Prairie and Fort Collins. I'm not saying they're not in there. I haven't read every word, but I feel like that's a really important focus for our community as well. And then obviously a chapter on recommended policies and programs that go along with the maps, and then implementation of priority projects. This will be, that's where the rubber meets the road, if you will. And then the last bit of work I've done, kind of brainstorming this in preparation for this meeting, is how would we engage the community? What often in the past has been called a public participation plan. Do we have a formal kickoff meeting? I wouldn't consider this it because it's not engaging the community, but having some sort of kickoff, having pop-up engagement opportunities. You've all received notice of this upcoming meeting with the Century Avenue Bridge project meeting later this month. I could have something there that lets people know about this process to sign up for more information. Obviously, events at Stonehorse Green, we have a farmer's market. So there's opportunities here to engage with the public. We have our ped bike transit listserv. I would rather just use that and not create a new, we've got 300 some members on that, and let's just use that for, I don't think we need to create a new listserv like we did for the zoning ordinance. Doing a community survey that could be online. It could be actually related to that is this idea of an online interactive map. Maybe there's a way that people could use a map that documents where they're seeing problems. Having a group walk or bike ride. Tad, I know you like to lead those. And then also if we could help, I'd appreciate your help either tonight or in the days ahead if you think of other ideas about how we can reach out to specific groups and organizations. So that's the groundwork I did for this meeting that I did not include in your packet.
Kirsten.
Oh, great way to spend a vacation, Mark.
Oh, this was mostly today, to be honest.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think it would be really important to include this Middleton Senior Center in that and have a meeting specifically or kind of town hall meeting specifically there, asking people where they see issues.
Okay. So specifically, actually, maybe I'll add that up here. Okay. So I mainly meant for this to be a free-flowing discussion about, I know I didn't give you any advanced materials, so I just want to see if you thought we were on the right track here and what kind of structure you saw. So if you want to go back to your discussion about a steering committee and how you'd like to each be involved, I welcome any and all help.
I want us to make sure that we're defining a specific audience that we're aiming this plan at. I have only so far read one active transportation plan. It was Fayetteville, Arkansas's, and I read it because it was only 48 pages. I've seen these long ones and I kind of don't want to read them because they're so long. So I want to make sure we're making something that people will actually read. Related to that, once it's done, we need to make sure it's very findable. Because yeah, Fayetteville, it's kind of their deal. They're aiming to be a bike mecca.
Okay.
I think they also kind of get away with it because their specific implementation is not in the active transportation plan. The plan describes their overarching goals. Their specific implementations are a long list otherwise, so you can focus just on the project you're interested in. Lisa.
I'm so glad you made that comment, Tad, because I was thinking the same thing. I'm looking at the Sun Prairie one, and my comment for Mark's guidance was going to be 75 pages is too long. When the sustainability committee updated the sustainable city plan, initially there were, we were going to get a consultant to do it. There were all kinds of metrics we were going to include, and the benchmarking and all I kept thinking is, who's going to implement the 100 actions that are going to come out of this plan? And who's the audience? Who's going to read it? Because I really feel like any member of the public should be able to access our plans and understand what it is that we're saying we'll do, whatever the plan is. And And so I love that you gave an example of one that's very accessible. I think it's also important to write the plan with the goal to how are we going to implement this plan? Because if we write the plan and it goes on a shelf, it's not really doing anything. And also for the maintenance, how do we check in on what we said we'd do and keep the plan up to date and a living document? So thank you for bringing up Fayetteville as an example. I think I could imagine just having this committee serve as a steering committee, or again, thinking of how the sustainability committee wrote the sustainable city plan, having 2 or 3 members tapped, small enough so that we don't run afoul of any quorum issues, but having, 2 or 3 members tapped to be that steering committee. And that way the whole committee doesn't have to be working on this at the same time, but the members who are serving on a steering committee can report back.
With a public engagement component, of course, so that other people are involved. Okay.
John.
Yep, we did public engagement for the sustainable city.
Yeah, I like the comments about being guiding, not doing, but I wonder if in some ways all these 150 page, 80 page documents are trying to cover too much all at one time in one document. And whether as an umbrella concept, the idea of a transportation plan is fine, but very clearly doing as I think the one Fort Collins did, breaking it down into individual types of transportation, types of motion around a town, and then focusing on just one of those at a time so that we can get some clear sense of direction, such as just looking at bikes, just looking at ped, just looking at public transportation as subsets, but not try to do all of these all at once. Start with the idea of the umbrella concept, but then break it down into manageable parts that we might handle one by one instead of all at one time.
Jim?
I tend to agree with that because on the University Avenue Corridor Committee, that was headed by some consultants. And what the attempt was to try to cover way too much. And what is University Avenue going to look like in 30 years? And we wound up in a situation where there were so many things that we couldn't do. And there was very little that we could do anything immediately. Ideally, you would have bike paths on University Avenue. Well, you'd have to narrow University Avenue. Or you'd have to, in some places, encroach on people's property, and they didn't have enough room for parking anyway. And that's why I think we'd probably be better to focus on 1 or 2 items, because I just don't think it'd be good if we create a 75-page document that we wind up can't do anything with. And maybe there are a few things. Maybe address something. How did you refer to that, Mark, as far as wheelchair accessibility and other accessibility?
Yeah, I was just wanting to make sure that we, as part of our complete streets and the idea of the most vulnerable user, that we start with the pedestrian, but that includes also people who have limited mobility, starting with that. That's why I put that first on the list, actually, pedestrians.
Okay, I was just using it as an example that maybe we could take something like this and say, okay, let's focus on that. Let's possibly, in the transportation area, bicycles, let's focus, how can we what issues do bicycles present in the downtown area? And as far as transportation there, how do we address some of those issues? I really just think that this would be, I think you would need a steering committee, and probably you want to get maybe maybe you get somebody from Public Works involved. Maybe you get somebody from Parks and Recreation involved. I don't know. Just that as a possibility. Anyway, that was just my thought on that.
Well, as part of my staff work, obviously this isn't going to just be me working on this. I will draw from the expertise of my colleagues in parks and public works in particular. And also, I think the police department, important part of this too. So it's, you know, how formally, it doesn't need to be that formally structured to work with my colleagues, obviously, but the putting this into manageable bite pieces that, you know, I can make steady progress to a goal. The idea of focusing on one or two things, I struggle with that idea, because what are the one or two things we should struggle on, that we should focus on, you know, without having a more holistic view of what our objectives are. So, yeah.
Well, if I could react, Mark, I guess I wasn't implying that we only work on one or two goals. It was the idea is you start with an overall larger strategic plan, but then you tackle it one step at a time rather than trying to tackle it all at once. You still have an end goal that's big, but you take what's perhaps the most manageable of the things, and you ultimately work towards covering everything, but you do it one step at a time. I would also, I guess, what I would really value, since it was just kind of thrown at us and we've just seen this, I would like to have time to sit down with any kind of a document like this.
Sure.
Maybe a good thing would be to bring it back at our next meeting,
well,
after we've had a chance to sit on this and think about it a little longer.
Yeah, what I was planning to do actually was, after this meeting and seeing what your discussion was and direction, I was actually going to send you some links to different documents, different, you know, just as a resource that on your own time you could look at. Yeah. I didn't want to, I mean, I thought about giving you some links ahead of time, and I thought, well, I don't want you don't need to read another community's plan. So I wanted to basically, before I went into this with too many preconceived notions, I wanted to have the committee discuss this.
Yeah, I would appreciate those links. I'd like to sit down with 3 or 4 of these others.
Okay.
See how they all pull it together.
Yeah. Okay.
See if we can't morph it into something for us.
Jim?
Mark, did you have any time frame in mind on this? I probably should have asked that in the beginning.
Well, the reason why it's coming to you now is because for the past couple of years, I've been working on a zoning ordinance. So this has been something on our to-do list for quite some time. Our bicycle and pedestrian plan was last updated in 2009. We did some edits to the bicycle network plan as part of the comprehensive plan, but that was kind of winging it based on our knowledge of you know, where it was basically updating the bicycle network plan map. It wasn't a real rigorous, you know, it wasn't an update to our bicycle plan. So is there a timeline for doing this? Obviously this year, this is one of our objectives in the department. I don't have like a date of May or August or anything like that in mind, but I don't want this to drag either. I think it's always good to have, I mean, to some Prairie, it looks like from their approach, they spent 1.5 years on it. I don't think it needs to be that involved or that long, but I think what I need to do is for the next meeting is with this input that I've gotten here, is come up with an overall plan for doing the plan with some timelines and things like that. I would welcome anyone's assistance if you have other perspectives you want to share outside of this meeting on an individual basis. I'm always happy to accept guidance like that. So the answer to your question is I oftentimes look at completion dates, like with the Cayuga connector, to feed into a budget process, which is in, we submit our budgets in August. I don't know that, is this going to be done by August? It would be nice to be able to get this done in the next few months. Depends how thorough we are, how thorough we want to be.
Could we, at the next meeting, just have this as the only agenda item, or have a separate meeting with this being the only agenda item?
Pat, as you're the chair, that's a request you're getting from a committee member. I'd be happy to work with Tad on that.
How do other folks feel about that?
Well, I think it's okay, but I think it's a little premature. I think we need at least another round first with getting a little better handle on what we want this plan to be.
Anybody else?
Is this vision, as you have read it now and have had a chance to think about it for a few minutes, do you see that as a good overall starting point? Again, doesn't have to be something we adopt right now. It's just to help frame the exercise that we have ahead of us. Do you all agree with that, or is that how you view this document, this planning process?
Lisa?
I like the vision statement. I think I would keep the second sentence as the first sentence because it sort of defines what active transportation is. And again, just thinking about making the whatever the document is that comes out of this accessible to the largest number of people, I would make it an active sentence like our vision for Middleton is to have it be a place where, like not have it be, I just have it be written in first person.
Okay. Yeah, I have always my whole career struggled with vision versus mission statements and all that. I just think some of that's a little overblown. But if you have some suggested edits, at least I always appreciate your phrasing of things. So I don't think we need to wordsmith this now, but the ideas are here. I think everyone agrees with these ideas. So if you want to share something with me more outside the meeting, that'd be fine. All right, so the question I still have, I guess, since I've heard different input, is whether we need a separate steering committee or not. I've heard different opinion. I think generally I've heard that this committee with some volunteers, a subset of volunteers, which I really personally, I like that idea a lot, based on Alder Hanaro's experience with the sustainability committee. And at the same time, I heard Jim, you talk about the University Avenue Quarter and getting more people involved in the community. So I think if we have this subset of the committee that helps with more frequent contact on this document, obviously we're still going to have a public involvement component with, we're still going to actively engage the citizens. So I think that's an approach that accomplishes the different perspectives I heard tonight. Go ahead, whoever said that.
That was me. I was going to say that, yes, I think that would work because the steering committee is going to have a great deal of additional work to do, and then be able to focus on that, and then be able to report back to the entire committee on issues. So, I mean, I think that is doable. What I didn't want to see was this just thrown in as another agenda item or just another item that comes up on the agenda, well, let's talk about this, and not go anywhere with it. So yes, I do agree with you as far as having a steering committee and to make sure we do get community input.
So I guess who from this body is interested are there people on this group aside from Kirsten, who I've heard mention or volunteer? Is there anyone else who would like to be more actively involved in this?
I very much would.
Okay. Okay. Well, if anyone else is interested, let me know. I appreciate Lisa's comment about the avoiding quorum or not getting anywhere near quorum issues, because it just becomes unwieldy to have to start worrying about those things. So if there's not half the committee here participating actively like that, then we don't have to worry about it. So, okay. So Kirsten and Tad, and if anyone else wants to join and be more actively engaged, let me know. Okay. All right. Thank
Do
you.
you have what you need for tonight?
Yeah, I think that's fine. And I'll
All
send
right.
out links. I'll send out links as well. So
All right. So item number 5, since I brought this up and I don't expect it to be particularly long, I'll just say that we're finally getting contactless payments on the bus. Yay! This is something that I believe Metro has been trying to do for nearly a decade now. So I'm extremely excited to see it finally go through. We do have a link to the presentation they showed. For the most part, we're not. I don't really expect to discuss anything on it tonight. Just sort of an FYI, Mark. If you go towards somewhere further down, something we will need to be aware of is that because our bus routes, the F and the R, are, where is it?
what did you want me to go to? What are you looking for?
There's a specific statement. I think it might be a little higher actually. Up again. Okay, right there. That slide. So some local routes will use 60-foot buses and board at BRT stations. Now we don't have any BRT stations planned in Middleton at the moment, and other things I've seen in this same slide seem to suggest that the 60-foot buses will be still able to use cash. Just our buses will primarily be using the tap to pay. So as more information about this comes out and gets clarified, we'll want to be able to communicate with bus riders in Middleton about what's happening.
Right.
So just an FYI.
So interesting. So the local buses,
right,
left
like
40
a
and
regular
60-foot buses, but what they're saying is that our buses are all going to be 60-foot buses, which I think I know.
right.
Okay. I sure hope that we have enough room at our bus stops for a 60-foot bus. That's something that I assume Metro has given us guidance on that. Anyway.
Yeah, well, we'll find out.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, on to staff updates. Bridge replacement?
Sure. Yeah. So this, I don't remember if I forwarded this to you all or not. I think I did. We're going to have the consultant for the Century Avenue Bridge replacement project has scheduled Thursday, February 22nd, 5:30, 7:30 p.m. at Cromery Middle School, public informational meeting. So it's really exciting that I'm just absolutely, I think we've talked about this before, but I'm just thrilled that there's going to be accommodations to get underneath Century Avenue. That is definitely there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. That is being incorporated into the design. So that is really good. We've come a long way where 2 years ago they said, oh, we don't want to do that. So we've really, I'm really pleased with that. So this will be an opportunity for the public to learn about the project and provide feedback. That's all I had for that one.
And number 2.
I have not started this actively, other than sending a letter last year. I have not done any more work on this since then, but it is something that I have here as a standing item just to remind you and myself that this is a project that we have before us for this year between the 2 Highland Way intersections to work with property owners we have $50,000 budgeted for the city funds to match 50,000 from the county to obtain as many easements as we can.
John?
Yeah, it's an informational question from Mark. With the bridge and Branch Street, are they still talking about trying to put in a entryway into the park system on the northwest side of that? Or I don't know the status. I haven't heard anything about that.
That's not. So that's at this point you're talking about the trailhead.
The trailhead, yeah.
Yeah. So we have for those of you who haven't heard of this project, I got too many. Here it is. Let me get rid of I'll show the contours. I guess that helps. So these orange areas are where the lines are close together, 1 foot intervals. So that conveys a stream bank. That's why you see that. And then you can see these 2 parcels here have fewer lines, so they are flatter. So this is an area where the city owns this land and has been envisioning having a small parking area, possibly a gazebo or shelter or something like that as a trailhead for this future corridor. I'm realizing now that the drawing you see here is from months ago. It's still it's still saved as a layer. But this is showing the Century Avenue road die concept. But here's the path right here. It's going to go underneath the bridge. And when it comes up on this side right now, to answer your question, John, there's not a plan to connect it with this.
Okay.
To be honest,
it's not a plan. It's still in the future.
Well, I'll learn more at that meeting myself.
Okay.
I'm not. I have seen they've done some concepts. They have some options, but I don't know what the status of it is. Sean Stowski is our point person for this project.
Okay.
So whether there's a loop that comes back here, I think what they're doing is they're planning a 10-foot wide bridge on the north side of Century to have this be a loop at this point. There is not a plan to have a separate bridge, to my knowledge.
The original plan, when I was on Parks and we were talking about, there was to be a bridge across, because the trailhead would be on the east side, and then there would be a bridge across somewhere into that parking lot. That was the plan until I got off of Park.
I think it's good to have all these future. I think it's good that we need to have that discussion locally, but from the standpoint of the county, they are, as long as we get the path underneath this bridge, how it connects everywhere else is really our challenge for the city.
Well, that's fine. I just want to know if that was part of this.
Yeah.
And you answered that.
The answer is it's not right now, but it's complex enough that we're happy just to get this path underneath the bridge, and how it comes out and connects is really up to us. So, and they're giving us the option to have it with the 10-foot wide, maybe it's even 12 feet wide. I can't remember. Part of the bridge is going to have that span will have it. So we have the option as a fallback. And I've certainly not objected to that. I welcome that. I'd love to see that on the other side as well, but the county is not going to do that on the other side. That way we have continuity with the future path that we would like to get along the north side here. So how that evolves with the trailhead is to be determined.
Okay.
That's, I think, all I had. Yep.
Do we have any future events or agenda items to request? Lisa.
I had three things I wanted to mention. One, the deadline for applying to get or nominating someone to get a Sustainable Middleton Award comes up on February 28th. And I really encourage, especially Kirsten and Tad to nominate themselves or each other to get an award for your very sustainable transportation options that you both employ. Also, we had a really good committee chair and vice chair meeting. Mayor Kuhn hosted that meeting. And I wonder if we could, at the next meeting, maybe have a little brief discussion about some of the things that came out of that, including the council is going to be looking at ways to consolidate committees. I don't think this committee needs to have any consolidation done, but things like the liaison relationships that we have, that's something that council wants to start looking at. You know, is it effective? Are there other ways to get that interaction between committees besides appointing liaisons? And then finally, you all might be interested in some traffic calming work that or ideas that are being thrown about in my district and District 7 too, for Pheasant Branch Road, Old Creek Road, and Frank Lloyd Wright. And I'd be happy to report on that in the future. There's a group that put together a neighborhood traffic management plan, and now they are coordinating with Old Creek Road, Conservancy Condos, Middleton Glen, and even now Middleton Hills on some ideas that they eventually want to bring to the Public Works Committee and this committee.
Kirsten?
For future agenda item, Tad and Mark, you answered my email regarding this, but adopting Madison's plowing plan that they plow the bike paths and walking paths even on weekends and holidays after a snowstorm. So I would like to see that as an agenda item in the future. Yeah, I think that we could really use that, because after these couple snowstorms that were on weekends, the paths got extremely icy and tamped down with that wet, heavy snow, and left a lot of ice for a long period of time. And for those who do bike commute or walk to the buses, it was extremely hard for quite some time. And then I just want to give a shout out to Brian Hull, who's our new code compliance. Is it manager, Mark?
I think that's his title, yeah.
Okay. He's just done an amazing job. I have been contacting him with a picture and an email when people are not shoveling their walks, and including the city. And he has responded really, really well and has gotten those areas taken care of. So I think he's just doing a great job.
And I will tell you from what I know of him, and he's been here a few months, but he's got a very cheerful disposition. He's problem solving oriented, solution oriented, good natured. So yeah, I think he's a great person for that job.
Yeah, I've been encouraging everybody to take a picture and email him if they see an area that has not been shoveled, either by residents or business. But I've been also encouraging people to, when writing him, be very kind. He's just the middle person.
Yeah.
He isn't the person that that didn't shovel. So I've been just asking people to be very kind and gentle when they email him.
I will give you, so for the next agenda item, what I'm hearing is you want to know more about our plowing plan. And without getting into it now, I will simply say that there have been discussions with some of my colleagues are working on that. So I'll ask one of them to come, or if there's a document coming out of that, we can discuss that, be briefed on that at the next meeting.
Anybody else? Okay, it did occur to me today that last year when we started talking about bike week ideas, we had some discussion about school-related events, and then it was pointed out that Bike Week is in June and school's pretty much done. So I wanted to, before it's June and school's pretty much done, maybe identify, and this is maybe a difficult thing for PBT, but maybe promote bike bus. This is a widespread concept, and maybe our role is just like asking if we know somebody to say, hey, start a bike bus. But yeah, just to actually do school related bike stuff before school is out.
So I'll have bike week planning on the agenda for next time.
Okay.
I will say under future events and under this item that our Parks and Rec staff are working with the police department, the community liaison officer, to have a bike rodeo scheduled for Elm Lawn at the end of March 29th, I think it is. March 29th. So there is initiative to between the city and other groups to plan bike events, bike safety events. Okay.
All right. Any further business? We're at the end of our agenda and no further business. We are adjourned. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Right.
Bye.